Greetings, students. Welcome back to Social Studies. Glad to be here. We've got some great stuff to look at, to learn about today. Before we do anything else, of course, I'd like to invite you to join me in beginning today's lesson with the Pledge of Allegiance. Take off my hat, I put my hand on my heart, and I say, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. Okay. We've just passed Memorial Day in our national calendar. I wonder if any of you are aware of any of your family members who have served in some of America's past wars. Some of you may have close family members who are members of our military today, or have been in recent years. Going back a few generations, most people in America whose families have been in this country for a few generations going back in time had a family member, and not everybody, but many people, who was connected to World War II, Vietnam, World War I, the Korean War, some of the conflicts of the 20th century. Now, both of my grandfathers were in the Navy during World War II. They were stationed in the Pacific. That war, which affected so many Americans' lives, many people went to serve, many people supported the war effort in other ways. It was a time in our country's history when women were taking on jobs in factories and other workplaces in ways that they had not previously in our society. So many, many families' lives were touched by this conflict. That war, however, lasted 4 years. Can you imagine how many people, families, how much society would be affected by a conflict that went on for not 4, not 5, not 10, but 200 years? 200 years of conflict, fighting, battle. That's the type of conflict that we're looking at today. It was an event called the Crusades. The Crusades. As you might know from your vocab list, the Crusades was a series of wars for what we call the Holy Land, 200-year series of battles and conflict over the territory that we call the Holy Land in the Middle Ages. This is the area around Jerusalem. Today it's the nation of Israel. It's in the area of Palestine, and the other countries there are like Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt to the south. In ancient times, we call this area Canaan. This was what Europeans, the people of this time in North Africa, the Middle East, thought of as the Holy Land. Christians, Jews, Muslims all placed a high value on the city of Jerusalem and the territory around it. Now, the thing about this is, the Crusades is not one war. In fact, when people learn about it, they usually number the series of conflicts that make up the greater Crusades. So you hear things like the First Crusade, the Second Crusade, the Third Crusade, the Fourth, so on. We're not going to look at it like that. That's too much information. It's just too much to keep in our minds. Now, the next slide in this presentation, or the next informational slide, is a map that references some of those numbers, but that's just for reference. We're going to give different sections of this conflict names in our presentation today. What's most important to understand before we get into some of the details is that this event, the Crusades, is probably the most important event of the Middle Ages. The reason for that is how it changes things, how it changes society, the way people live, the places they live, the ways they behave. Crusades has a powerful and profound effect on Europe, the Near East, North Africa, all the people and places involved. So just to set this up, okay, this is a complex series of conflicts where on one side we have the European Christian armies, on the other side we have the followers of Islam, Muslim armies of the Near East. So what had happened is, as Islam quickly spread throughout North Africa and the Middle East, the Islamic Empire had taken control of many lands. Now, shortly before the start of the Crusades, a group called the Seljuk Turks had taken control of the Islamic Muslim Empire. Turks is the word for this group. That word became the name of the modern country, Turkey. So that word is sort of still with us. In the Middle Ages, this group, the Turks, had taken control of the Islamic Empire. Now, their armies and their empire were pushing very close to the territory controlled by the Byzantines. The Byzantine Empire, with their capital city in Constantinople. Meanwhile, the church, the people of Constantinople, you remember this was a Christian city, but the church leaders of Constantinople had broken away from the Western churches led by the Pope in the city of Rome. There had been a major divide, a split. In fact, it's such an important event in history of its own, it's referred to as the Great Schism, the big breakup between the Western churches in Rome and the Eastern churches in Constantinople. The divide is still there today. Today, the Pope, who lives within the city of Rome, in a place called the Vatican, is the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. In Constantinople, we have leadership of the Eastern Orthodox Church. Both are Christian, okay, similar but different. Now, in the Middle Ages, it was very popular for Christians from Europe to go on pilgrimages. A pilgrimage is a journey for religious purposes. So Christians would frequently journey to the Holy Land, the territory around Jerusalem. And they would also make pilgrimage, other trips, to sites connected to the life of Jesus, sites connected to the lives of Christian saints, and other important things connected to stories from the Bible. A tradition of pilgrimage is also in the Muslim religion. Okay, Muslims make a pilgrimage to the city of Mecca, and they may travel for other religious purposes. Both faiths place a high value on the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem today is the capital city of the nation of Israel. Okay, I feel like I'm repeating myself just a little bit. That's okay, repetition. Now, I'm going to read in a moment from the book, the introduction from the section in the old textbook about this. I posted this chapter from the textbook on Classroom today. So if you want to have a more detailed look at some of this information, you can read that section, section 4, in chapter 25 from the textbook. The material in this presentation is largely taken from that section, but I couldn't put everything because it would be too much, too detailed. Now, what I need you to do is, as you go through the presentation today, read the material on each slide, look at the pictures, then play a video if the video is there. This video will be the longest one in the presentation. The rest of them will be shorter, okay? But I'm going to speak assuming that you've read and looked at the pictures before playing the video. Okay, so little introduction. I already said some of this, but here's what the book says. For hundreds of years, Christians from Western Europe had visited shrines in Jerusalem. Then, in 1071, a people called Seljuk Turks took conquered Jerusalem and took control of the Christian shrines. Traveling in Palestine became difficult for the Christians because of the trouble there. When news of what was happening in the Holy Land reached Christians in Western Europe, they were shocked and angered. The result was a series of holy wars called Crusades, which went on for about 200 years. Even after they had taken Palestine, Turkish armies continued to threaten the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine emperor asked the Pope for military aid. Pope Urban II agreed to help the Byzantines. He hoped that in return, the Eastern Orthodox Church, would again unite with the Roman Catholic Church and accept him as its religious leader. So a bit of a quid pro quo here, okay? If we send help to the city of Constantinople, hopefully the people there will want to reunite with the Western Church. In 1095, Urban spoke before a large crowd in the town of Clermont in eastern France. He told the people that Europe's lords should stop fighting among themselves. Instead, they should fight in a crusade against the Turks. Urban reminded the people that Europe was not producing enough food to feed its growing population. Palestine, on the other hand, had rich, fertile lands on which any knight could live in comfort. The Pope promised that those who went on a crusade would be free of debts and taxes. Little added incentive. He also promised that God would forgive the sins of those who died in battle. He encouraged soldiers to go to Palestine wearing a red cross on their tunics as a symbol of obedience to God. So Pope Urban promised a number of different incentives to the knights and lords of Europe if they stopped fighting each other and instead marched to the Holy Land, the Middle East, to fight against the Seljuk Turks who threatened Constantinople. But he had an idea of his own. He thought that there would be maybe a larger event would be the reuniting of the Eastern and Western churches if things went well. Well, we'll see how that all works out. The next informational slide you're going to look at will be a map, okay? You can kind of just look through that and see what information you can piece together. Just remind yourself of what part of the world we're talking about. And by the way, guys, you have 2 days to go through this presentation fully. You might go through the whole thing right now today, okay? But don't rush. Think about your answers. The way that I've been grading Nearpods, okay, is I'm looking to see that you're thinking about information in the presentation, combining with some of your own ideas, and reflecting on some of the things that we've learned throughout the year. This isn't the first time that we've talked about this part of the world. This isn't the first time that we've talked about conflict between different groups, okay? You have a lot to draw from. Your answers should be about 2 to 3 sentences when you type an open-ended sentence or response. Remember, capitalize, punctuate, right? And try to double check your spelling. You shouldn't spell words wrong if they're right in the previous slide. Okay? Guys, I enjoy working on this stuff with you and learning about it. This is some of my favorite stuff to learn about, and tip of the hat to you for following along and getting your work done. See you soon.